that you remember maybe more than any other from the season? Maybe it's the Hail Mary. I don't know. What would it be for you?
So that's the thing. Last season was so special, and I was lucky enough to be in the building for the Hail Mary that's going to live in my memory forever in a different special place. But I'll never forget being in here doing the pre and post game show for the Bucks game, just being with Linnell, Denton, Ben Strober, just a bunch of guys who have never seen this team go to these heights before. The Zane Gonzalez doinking it in. We all went nuts. I had a pit in my stomach because I was horribly marred by 25 years of just disappointment. So when it bounced through, we all went ape. It was so crazy. And then the Detroit game was just, it was, that run was so unbelievably fun. And it's something that's just going to live on in my memory forever. All of those games are all going to run together for me. But,
for all that's said about that season, in retrospect, not only during the offseason, but especially now after a 5-12 season, looking back at 2024, and the descriptions of that season, they really tilt towards lucky, great fortune, pixie dust, being spread all over the team. But when they got to the postseason, they played two really good football teams, and they beat them both on the road. And they beat the number 1 seed handily on the road. Let's not forget that in this season that included, a Hail Mary and getting lucky with some of the teams they played, Spencer Rattler and Jake Haener and Kenny Pickett and Will Levis. And I can't even remember all of the bad quarterbacks that they faced during the course of the year. When they got to the postseason, if it truly was a lucky football team, a team that was just lucky to be there, lucky to win a bad division, or lucky to win a lot of close games against bad teams, they would have gone out much earlier. Tampa's one thing. Detroit on the road, that environment, there weren't a lot of Skins fans that night at Ford Field. There were a lot of Skins fans at Raymond James. That was not a hostile road environment. Detroit was, and the Lions were humming, man. They were hurt on defense. They were injured on defense, but Washington had a terrible defense going into the game. So let's not forget that for all of the good fortune the 2024, Skins had, they won 2 road playoff games, including eliminating a year ago Sunday the number 1 seed from the postseason. And it was a devastating blow for Lions fans. Devastating. You really got a sense of how devastating it was when the quarterback series on Netflix came out this summer, and Jared Goff was one of the 3 quarterbacks featured. And you saw the reaction of family and friends in the box and the crowd at the end of that game or during that game. They could not stop us. Couldn't stop us. So, yeah. And this weekend's a great weekend in sports. Look, for me, I actually think last weekend now has become a better weekend than this weekend, in part because you have college football semifinal game number 1 on Thursday night, college football semifinal game number 2 on Friday night, and then you get 6 games over 3 days, 2 on Saturday, 3 on Sunday, and then the 1 on Monday night. Here you get 2 tomorrow, 2 Sunday, traditional divisional round, schedule, although many years ago, not that long ago, you didn't have the 2-night games. You had the games played primarily during the day, a 1 o'clock and a 4 o'clock game. You don't have to go back that far to find the 1 o'clock and the 4 o'clock game. Although they started to play a Saturday night game, so the Saturday schedule went to like 4:30 and 8:15, but the Sunday schedule until recently was more of a 1 and 4:25 deal. But we get the later afternoon starts both days. We get 2 night games. The Sunday game starting at 6:30, sort of the NFC Championship, AFC Championship schedule on Sunday, and then a little bit later in prime time on Saturday night. 4 really interesting games. I've got some L-Test picks if you want them today after last weekend. I can understand if you don't, or maybe you just want them to go against. That's fine. But This, I'm telling you, this for many people is the weekend of the year on the sports calendar. I think last weekend exceeds it for me. I'm excited about this weekend. Don't get me wrong. And we do get the national championship game on Monday night, and we get a holiday on Monday as well. So that's nice. But I think Thanksgiving weekend is right there with last weekend and the first weekend of the NCAA tournament. That would be so. Let me put these in order. I think Thanksgiving weekend is my number one, Max, because you have NFL football on Thursday. You know, you get the triple header on Thanksgiving Day. Now you got a Black Friday game. And it's one of the most incredible college football weekends of the year because it's rivalry weekend. And you get a game on Thanksgiving night, whatever it is, and then you get games all day Friday. And then on Saturday at noon, you get Ohio State, Michigan. You get the Iron Bowl. You get all of these massive games and massive rivalry games. And then you got an NFL Sunday, you know, start to finish. And, you know, if you're a college hoops fan like I am, it is madness during that week.
Feast week,
with
baby.
All of the college basketball games. It's not even a weekend. It's an entire week of sports and great sports.
Yeah, Thanksgiving's probably up there for me. But man, there's just something about Super Wildcard with the college football playoff happening too. Because
yeah, it was great last weekend.
Man, the semifinals, I've kind of said it since we've started to expand a little bit. I think the semis might be better than the final. We're gonna find out here on Monday. But man, Indiana looks so good. But yeah,
well, that Miami Ole Miss game was off the charts, and last year we had really good semifinal games.
We did, and then on top of that, you got all the divisional round or the wild card weekend games that are unbelievable, and everybody's watching them. So it's pretty much the only thing anyone's talking about. So it's great when we're all locked in.
The tournament, you know, the Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, and I know we get the the first four, on Tuesday and Wednesday, whatever. But that Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday is incredible. Not to mention, more often than not, it's spring. It can be St. Patrick's Day, which adds to the festivities. And it's just hoops from noon until like 1 a.m. Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday with, just so much drama typically. Look, the last week in the NFL playoffs, I mean, the first four games were insane. To get those, first four, Carolina, Rams, Packers, Bears, Jags, Bills, Eagles, Niners, all came down to the final drive of the game. And then we got the Patriots, Chargers. It was, a one-score game going into the fourth quarter, but it never felt like it. And then the Monday night was also a one-score game actually going into the fourth quarter. It was 7-6, but it was a dominant performance by Houston. This is, I think a lot of people like this weekend because you get the best teams. Yeah. You get your two number one seeded bye teams into it. And, until we went to the current format, it was the top two seeds that had sat out wild card weekend. And so you get the best teams and theoretically the best matchups, although last week's matchups were outstanding. We're going to go through all four today. Again, we'll pick all four, and then I'll have my smell test picks later on in the show. A couple of guests on the show today. Ben Standig will join us at noon, and we'll get an update on, where the defensive coordinator search is, where the offensive line search is, because that's a search that's still going on. And then we will talk to Ben Fawkes. Ben is a gambling expert and writes for a number of publications. Ben will join us at 11 a.m. to get sort of the overall take on not only the four quarterfinal games or divisional round games, but the championship game on Monday night as well. All right. A couple of things from the end of the show yesterday that happened. I mean, Sam Darnold came up injured in practice with an oblique injury. Sam Darnold missed practice.
Drew Lock got reps.
I would say this is a major development But at the same time, I've said over and over again, I love Seattle. I just don't trust Sam Darnold. But it's not like I trust Drew Lock more. They need Sam Darnold in this game. He's going to play according to everybody that is covering this particular game. I was watching a lot this morning on NFL Network in particular, and nobody thinks he's not going to play. And he said that he's going to play. He'll be ready to go, but it's an oblique injury. It sort of came up out of nowhere. Interesting development there for sure. Meantime, it looks like Fred Warner won't play for San Francisco. But if they win, could he play next week? Maybe. But he is out against the Seahawks in that game. And then there's still no deal finalized with John Harbaugh in New York. I'm assuming it will get done. Certainly all of the reporting, including Adam Schefter, say that a deal is imminent. But apparently they're still working out the numbers. That's one of those things where you've seen it go the other way from definitive sounding reporting to, what happened? I don't think this is that. But if you don't get a deal done with John Harbaugh today, then that's an interesting development in that. And I am interested now in not only our, offensive coordinator hire, which has already happened, and our defensive coordinator hire, which hasn't happened. But let's not forget, Philadelphia in the division needs an offensive coordinator, and the Giants need both. John Harbaugh is not an X's and O's play calling coach. He is the definition of a CEO coach, of a culture builder, of a leader, of, a big decision maker during the games. Are we going for it on fourth down? Are we going for two? Whatever it is, I can tell you that the Ravens were early on with heavy analytics people. So it's not like he was making those decisions on his own. He was taking the advice of somebody in his ear. But they got to hire an offensive coordinator that will want to work with Jackson Dart. They got to hire a defensive coordinator, which, by the way, they've got some talent on defense. And Philly's got an offensive coordinator to hire. I'm going to be really interested to see what Philly does in particular, replacing Kevin Patullo. Does Mike McDaniel end up in Philadelphia? Does Brian Daboll end up in Philadelphia? In so many ways, I think Daboll is a great fit for Philly. Is Cliff Kingsbury a possibility in Philadelphia? Is Kevin Stefanski a possibility in Philadelphia? The Philadelphia offensive coordinator hire in our division is a massive hire. That's been the difference between Super Bowl contenders and not. Kellen Moore, Shane Steichen, Super Bowl contenders. Brian Johnson, Kevin Patullo, not. Now, this year, you could point to the injuries along the offensive line as a big difference from last year's team. But Kellen Moore would be the other big difference from last year's team. And the thing that I was thinking about with Kevin Patullo is the nature of first-time offensive coordinators, which is the path that Dan Quinn and maybe even Dan Quinn and Adam Peters have decided to go down. I was talking to Jay Gruden about this, and he said one of the real challenges of a first-time offensive coordinator is, just the nature of now it's on you. And now you got to do it with the headphones on and everybody looking at you. But the other part of it that's more practical is that, and more tangible, really, and more predictable, is that first-time offensive coordinators, especially when they're as young and as inexperienced as David Blau is, they don't have the ability to recall against certain defensive coordinators. Jay was telling me that he likes the Rams a lot on Sunday night against the Bears. And he said one of the reasons is Sean McVay's just always had Dennis Allen's number. Dennis Allen is the defensive coordinator for Chicago. He said, if you go back to, our teams, New Orleans could never stop us with Dennis Allen. Even when we lost the game, Like they lost that. Remember in 2017, they lost the 2-touchdown lead late, lost in overtime, lost Chris Thompson to a broken leg in that game. But they scored 34 or whatever it was. They scored 40 against New Orleans one year. Even in the game in which Drew Brees lit them up with Alex Smith, they scored points, moved the football. Now, that was not actually a Sean McVay team. But he said he's always had a really good feel for Dennis Allen. And he said that, and he said that's one of the things that when you are a young, inexperienced, haven't done it offensive coordinator, and then you have a defensive head coach who doesn't have that experience as an offensive head coach going against certain defensive coordinators. He said that's a disadvantage early on. So I would expect Philadelphia to hire an experienced offensive coordinator. For sure. Kellen Moore was experienced. He had done it in Dallas. And we'll see whether or not that is, a limiting factor for a David Blau in his first year. Jay also said it's very important for Washington that the hire was somebody that Jaden Daniels felt comfortable with and has worked with. He thought that was the overriding reason for the hire and that it makes a lot of sense to him. He's also was not a big fan and isn't a big fan of Mike McDaniel. He said too many issues protecting the quarterback over the years, too many, wasted years with one of the fastest teams in the league. And he actually preferred David Blau over Mike McDaniel. But I thought the point that he made to me when we were talking was just the idea that when you're a first-time coordinator, you don't have a book. You don't have a book like Sean McVay has on Dennis Allen this weekend. That Kyle Shanahan, well, he's got a book of 2 games against Mike McDonald, but that Sean Payton has against almost every defensive coordinator in the league. And that is super valuable when preparing your team. When an offensive coordinator goes about preparing a team and putting that install in on Wednesday, a lot of it factored into what they've developed is based on their historical, data points with the upcoming defensive coordinator. And in game, flashbacks to, I remember what he did in this particular spot. So we're going to call this, or this is going to be the can. This is going to be the check. So I think that's an interesting thing. And I think the, Harbaugh hire in New York is an interesting overall hire. More on that in a second. But I think that the coordinator hires are going to be big. I expect Philadelphia to hire experience after having inexperience. I expect the Giants to have their pick to a certain degree because of Harbaugh. Washington defensively, we still don't have a coordinator. I'm still fingers crossed on Brian Flores. Like I said yesterday, I think there is a slightly greater chance than maybe I thought the day before. There may be some stuff going on in Minnesota with him. And by the way, some of that stuff, who knows? Maybe it's in a limiter for him anywhere right now, but he's interviewing everywhere, including for head coaching jobs. There's no doubt that if he's available, that's got to be number one on the list for Washington, unless there's something we are missing. And oftentimes there are lots of things that we're missing. So I wanted to take this next part of the show and talk about the division moving forward. We don't have any teams in the playoffs anymore, the NFC East. The NFC East only produced one playoff team, and the Eagles lost last week. The Giants are overhauling everything. The Eagles need an offensive coordinator, and they need to be healthier along their offensive line. They certainly have the best talent. Dallas will come back with Schottenheimer year 2 after a very disappointing season. And Washington's going to come back with 2 coordinators new following a season in which they were, completely out of it and had no chance because they lost so many players during the course of the year. But I was thinking specifically about the Giants hiring Harbaugh. Does that change the order, if you will, of top to bottom perceived strong teams in the NFC East? Like, what's the order right now? Does Harbaugh move the Giants up to number 2 behind Philadelphia. I mean, I like John Harbaugh. I don't think John Harbaugh's Bill Walsh or Joe Gibbs or Bill Parcells or Bill Belichick or Vince Lombardi or even Andy Reid. I don't. I think he is a phenomenal leader, culture builder, the whole thing. But, all of the coaches that I just mentioned, had specific areas that they impacted weekly on the field, offense or defense. He was a special teams coach, but he wasn't the special teams coach in Baltimore. I think Harbaugh's a great hire for the Giants right now. I'm not criticizing that hire. I think they need culture. Think about their situation. Coughlin retires, after the 2015 season, and they go McAdoo, Spags, Shermer, Dable. I mean, it's been a disaster. The Giants with Coughlin, I know the last few years weren't great with Coughlin, but they were still close to those 2 Super Bowls, and they were a perennial contender and perceived, by the way, as an elite organization. And now, 10 years later, they're a bottom feeder. The Giants, the Mara family, they have managed to sink that franchise to all-time lows, although Giant fans will probably tell me that there were periods in the 70s that were all-time lows or some other decade. But they have been bad. So that's why the Harbaugh hire makes a lot of sense. You need a culture turnaround. That's why in many ways our group believed that Dan Quinn was the right hire, because this was a bottom-feeding professional sports franchise that had a horrible culture, and they'll tell you can't sustain win with a bad culture. And hiring a first-time head coach, which was, among the people they were talking to, would have been a risk. They had a first-time general manager. They didn't want a first-time head coach. They wanted a highly respected culture builder, leader. And that's what the Giants are hiring. I'm not comparing Quinn's resume to Harbaugh's resume. Although Harbaugh only went to 1 Super Bowl. He won it. Quinn's only been to 1, and he lost it. But it's not like Harbaugh was in the Super Bowl every year. In fact, the one thing you can say about Harbaugh's career as a head coach in Baltimore is over the last third of it, they underachieved over and over again in the postseason, losing as a higher-seeded team multiple times, including at home to Tennessee, to Kansas City in an AFC title game. I know it's the Chiefs, but the Ravens were favored. They were the higher-seeded team 2 years ago. I'm a Harbaugh fan, but I'm not a Harbaugh is the best coach in the NFL or among the top 5 coaches in the NFL. I mean, where are the standings? Just so I can go through it. I mean, McVay, Kyle, take both of them over John Harbaugh. I'd take Matt LaFleur over John Harbaugh.
So Brian and I were talking about Harbaugh and the flirting versus harassment. Mike McCarthy has pretty much the same resume as Harbaugh, but just not the lack or the recent success, especially with Lamar. So kind of comparing those two, what are your thoughts, Kevin? I'm curious.
So I think that's an interesting comp. I think the difference is that Mike McCarthy is the offensive leader and play caller, so he's much more involved in the actual, game. But I don't think McCarthy is probably the leader or the culture guy that Harbaugh is. So I would probably lean towards a John Harbaugh over a Mike McCarthy. But let me just tell you, like right now in the league, all right, let me give you the guys. McVay, Kyle. Andy Reid in front of John Harbaugh. I'd take his brother over him. I would.
Agreed.
Matt LaFleur, yes. Tomlin, until, being out of the league. Big Tony wouldn't agree. Sean Payton, for sure. Right?
Yeah. No, I'd take Sean. He's done
Vrabel.
wonders for the
I'd take
Broncos.
Vrabel over him.
Very much, yeah.
I wanted to say Todd Bowles, and I love Todd Bowles. I love Todd Bowles.
You towed the line.
There's some young guys that we're not sure of. Like Mike McDonald might be a guy that if we really knew him, we'd say him. We might say the same about Shane Steichen.
Yeah.
We might say the same about Ben Johnson.
Listen, I might be ready to say it about
I mean,
McDonald
I just
and
listed
Johnson.
8 or 9 coaches that I'd probably consider before John Harbaugh. But I'm not knocking the hire. I think the Giants need somebody like that, just like I think Washington needed somebody like Dan Quinn in that moment. They got to fix it. They've got a terrible losing culture right now. The New York Giants do. 10 years in the dumper. I mean, they went to the playoffs that first year of McAdoo and lost, and then they went to the playoffs with Dable in 22, won a game, and then got blown out by the Eagles. That's it. I mean, they didn't have the run we had, 19 years without winning a playoff game. But I wanted to lead into this, which is how would you rank the NFC East situations right now? Who's got the best situation? I think it's Philadelphia number one, not debatable. I don't care about the Sirianni, A.J. Brown stuff, Kevin Patullo stuff. They still have the best front office in the division, the best general manager in the division, and they've got the best talent and the best roster in the division. So Philly's one. I'm going to tell you right now, there are people with the hiring of Harbaugh that would put the Giants in their roster, which is a solid roster, especially on defense, and they've got a superstar wide receiver coming off injury. And there are believers in Jackson Dart. I'm not a big believer in Jackson Dart, but what do we know 2 years into it, a year into it, I'm sorry, for him. Here's my order. You ready? And we'll open it up for calls. 301-230-0980. Rank the NFC situations, all right? Not the teams right now, just the overall situation. Front office, coaching staff, quarterback, roster. Rank them. For me, it would go Philadelphia 1. Washington is still 2. And that's because I still would take Jaden Daniels over any of the other 3 quarterbacks in the division. Jalen Hurts, Jackson Dart, and yes, Dak Prescott. I don't know who's number 3. Let me just say this. There's a big step between Philadelphia and the next 3. I'll go Washington 2, the Giants 3, Dallas 4. Give me your NFC East rankings of the overall situations of the franchise.
Man, this is... So, I got some interesting thoughts on this one.
We'll save them for the other side.
All right, then let's do it.
Okay, and we'll open it up for calls. 301-230-0980, 301-230-0980. Rank the NFC East teams based on their overall current and moving forward situation. Front office, ownership, quarterback, coaching staff, roster. I think it's easy that Philly's number 1. I don't know how you could even debate that. I mean, the A.J. Brown situation from last weekend, him borderline throwing the game. I mean, that's a harsh way to put it, but my God, it looked like he had zero interest in winning that football game or participating in that game, and hurt the Eagles tremendously in that football game. But that aside, Eagles are number 1 for me. We'll get Max's rankings. I want yours at 301-230-0980. I think a lot of people think with John Harbaugh's hire, the Giants have ascended to, at the very least, the number 2 position in the NFC East. Of the 4 NFC East teams, who's got the best situation right now with John Harbaugh going to the Giants? I think a lot of people would say that's the best coach in the division now. He'll hire, I'm sure, 2 outstanding coordinators. Let's see if Todd Monken ends up in New York, and I don't know who the defensive coordinator would be. I would rank the situations, which is the overall ownership, front office, coaching staff, quarterback, rosters. Philly's still number 1 for me, but Washington's number 2 still. I'm sorry, but the Detroit win a year ago this Sunday, we came in with a couple of highlights from that game, is still fresh in my memory. I know it seems like it's a lot longer in the rear view for many of you, but I know why they sucked this year. I'm not saying they would be still playing this year had they stayed healthy, because I think the defense had major issues, but they're not that far away. They're not that far away from at least winning more games than they lose and contending for the playoffs. The Giants have a nice roster. They've got a culture-building coach, CEO coach. I've got them 3, and then I've got Dallas 4. Dak's getting older. He's 10 years into the league. Remember, he gets hurt. 3 out of his 10 seasons derailed by injury. So that's a 30%, lost season hit rate for him with a much longer history of that. I like Dak. I think he's a really good quarterback. I don't think he's an elite quarterback. They have major defensive problems as well. And I'm long from, assigning greatness to Brian Schottenheimer as a head coach. They clearly need new defensive help everywhere. So I got them last. I do think that Washington, the Giants, and Dallas are very close. I do. But that's the order I'd put him in after Philadelphia. Max, what's your order?
So my number 1, obviously, it's going to be Philly. Like the gap just feels so wide at this point. Now it is being closed by the teams that are going to be number 2 and 3 on my list. But I really think it's hard for me to remove my bias from how I view the situation for Washington. I have them 2. But I feel like if you asked a fan from every fan base around the NFC East right now, they would tell you Philly 1, and then they would come up with an excuse for their team to be listed at number 2. Now, maybe Giants fans that have a little bit less of a leg to stand on, just given how this last season's gone, and, well, even prior to that. But I really think it's a lot closer than we think between Dallas and Washington. Both those defenses were terrible. Dallas's offense had one hell of a year. I'm kind of talking myself into putting Dallas 2, but then you get to the Jerry Jones of it all, and that's really where I knock them down to 3. So Eagles are going to be 1, Commanders 2, Dallas 3, and then I'm still putting the Giants at 4 just because I don't trust Joe Shane, and Mr. Mara is accelerating the clock because I know he doesn't know how much time he has left either.
Let me ask you this. How would you rank the rosters overall? Because I think that's where the Giants might be number 2.
Yeah, so Eagles 1, I'm kind of Cowboys 2, Giants 3.
Why? Just because of Lamb and Pickens, and they have to re-sign Pickens.
They do have to re-sign Pickens. I do like their weapons. I really like Javonte Williams out of the backfield. I think he's just a thumper. He runs super angry, and I love that out of a running back. He'll just run through your face.
Burns, Carter, but Dexter Lawrence.
But they're all high. They all pop up in individual spots. I haven't really seen them all come. It happens very rarely where they all come together and are playing as a full unit. So I just have to see it more from the Giants front.
All right. Let me just say this. The Giants have more defensive talent than Baltimore had this year.
Agreed. That I will give you.
And offensively, it comes down to whether or not Jackson Dart is the right guy, clearly. But they do have Malik Neighbors. They do have Cam Scadaboo. Both of them will be coming off serious injuries.
Concussion merchants.
Yeah, I mean, but the thing is that for me, at the end of the day, I'm thinking about GM, coach, quarterback. Not in that order.
Sure.
It would be quarterback, GM, coach, probably in that order. And Washington still, for me, has the best, situation at quarterback. It's the best promise long-term.
For sure.
And the most recent performance of him being healthy and playing is 2024. I mean, there was no rhythm established this year to really evaluate. Let's go to our guy, Aveen. Aveen, rank the NFC East teams in terms of their overall situation. I think there are people that believe Harbaugh lifts the Giants, into the 2 spot behind Philadelphia. What do you say?
Hey, Kevin. First off, I've still got the Giants as a clear number 4. I think a lot isn't known about Dart. To me, I'm skeptical. I think he kind of seems a little gimmicky. I'm not sure about his tools.
Agreed.
I think the consensus was that he was overdrafted and he wasn't a day 1 pick like he was picked. So I think a quarterback is so important. A lot is unknown with him. And with Harbaugh, I'll say that, the question is how much did Harbaugh, as a CEO coach, how much did he benefit from being behind or being aided by an elite front office? It's kind of like Sirianni. I mean, I think he's a good coach, but we'll see how much, having that elite front office with him helped him out in Baltimore. Is it going to be the same situation with the Giants? So I have them as a number 4. And then,
I'm sitting here and I'm thinking, how do I have the Giants ahead of the Cowboys when I clearly would take Dak Prescott 10 times out of 10 over Jackson Dart? So part of me wants to change and move the Cowboys into the 3 spot and the Giants into the 4 spot. But I do think that the Giant roster, and now with Harbaugh, that's a better situation than Dallas has. But go ahead.
Right. I agree with that. And I'll say for the top spot, I think it's muddled between the other 3 teams. And I'll say this about Philadelphia, and I said it before the season started. They have really serious problems with the quarterback position. The quarterback is limited. He's getting worse. And he's dragged that offense down the past 3 seasons. That Eagles offense has underperformed the last 3 seasons.
You think it's him more than the coordinator?
For sure. I mean, they run no matter the coordinator, they run the same iteration of the offense. It's the Jalen Hurts offense. Nothing over the middle, everything short to the outside. Kellen Moore had to change his offense when he went there. They just really benefited from Saquon having this crazy season, which masked a lot of their problems. And you've seen the reporting. The coaches, the people in the front office, the players are getting set up with Jalen Hurts' limitations. A.J. Brown wants out. They could be without A.J. Brown, Dallas Goedert, and Lane Johnson next season. So that offense might be really bad. But quarterback's the most important thing. They got serious issues there. And then with Dallas has the most, talented roster, but Dak is very good. He's not elite like Jaden. Washington, Jaden is the most valuable, asset in the whole NFC East.
Okay.
He's an elite quarterback. He can elevate the rest of the roster. So I think it's muddled. I think we have the least talented roster, but we have the most important thing.
Yeah, the only thing that I would say about Jalen Hurts is I think there are just too many games, Aveen, in which he has played completely different than he plays in the regular season, and he's delivered big time. And I say that because maybe the coordinator isn't the issue. Maybe the head coach is the issue. The idea that we're really good on defense, we can run the ball last year anyway with Barkley in 24. Don't turn the ball over. It's Sirianni's number 1 mantra. If we win the turnover battle, we win the game. Of course, that did not happen in the playoff game, actually, against San Francisco, where Purdy threw 2 picks and they still won the game. I'm not as down on Jalen Hurts as you are, but I'm very curious as to see what they do offensive coordinator wise and how they change going into next year. Thanks for the call. Let's get to Cam. Cam in DC. Cam, give me your top 4 NFC East situations now that it certainly looks like Harbaugh is going to take the Giants job.
What's up, Kevin? Thanks for taking my call. So I'm going to Philly 1, and I say this to you all the time. I'm with you. I'm not totally out on Jalen Hurts. I think, there's a couple other things going on there. I think we're 2. I got to go with Dallas as 3, only because I think the New York has the worst general manager and ownership in the division right now. Like Joe Shane is, he smells his own stuff, and he hasn't really earned the right outside of maybe Carter and Landon Burns. I think was that 2 summers ago now. I don't think he's really earned the right to smell his own stuff as much as he does. So it's close for me, Dallas and New York, but I got to go with Dallas is 3, New York is 4.
Okay. Appreciate that, Cam. Joe, Skip, Athen, Ian, everybody Stay right there. We'll take a quick break. We'll take more of your calls next. The Giants have the 5th pick in the draft. Quarterback's not going to be an option, but I wonder if Harbaugh's taking this job thinking what many think, which is, Jackson Dart's a blue tent guy. That's where he spends most of his time. I need a quarterback. You'd think that would be a big part of why he took the job, that he must think that Jackson Dart can be the real deal. But maybe they're just going to go out and sign Malik Willis. Seriously.
I just got a crazy idea, Kev. What if the Giants at 5 decided to swap out one Ole Miss quarterback for another, and Trinidad Chambliss goes to the New York Giants at 5?
How about that?
That would be interesting.
What if he decided to bring old Joe Flacco back? Be the Giant quarterback.
Be sick, dude. You know what? Screw it. Get him and Phil in there. Him and Phil Rivers. Oldest quarterback doing the league.
Rank the NFC East situations 1 through 4. I've got it. Philly 1, Washington 2. I changed my mind. Aveen made me change my mind. He's done that before. Dallas 3, and the Giants 4, because the bottom line is they might be in the quarterback market now or as soon as next year after 1 year with Jackson Dart. They have by far and away the weakest and the most uncertain quarterback situation in the division. Good luck, John Harbaugh. Skip, go ahead.
Kevin, I agree with you and about the quarterback, waiting heavily on the quarterback. However, roster-wise, I put the Commanders in the number 4 spot.
Me too.
I think, okay, so in the quarterback, last year it was a slam dunk. He was the best quarterback in, the division and maybe in the NFC. But with the injuries, it's a little more questionable, but I still rate him the best. I would say Dak is number 2. And, I think Hurts, he's a Super Bowl MVP. So, he's close. He can do it in the
There's something going on there,
game.
though. We're gonna get this thing figured out. They have to. Is it the coordinator? Is it the head coach? Is it the quarterback? Because now this year, I do think with Philadelphia that offensive line fell apart with the lost players and the lost games, and it was not what it was in 2024 when it was absolutely dominant, maybe the best offensive line in football, to go with, arguably the best defensive line in football. But yeah, I mean, Jalen is a difficult conversation. It's complex, I think. I think there's a lot to it.
Yeah. And Kevin, I just wanted to mention before I go, your conversation with Charles yesterday about the music, that was so wonderful.
Of course, my son reminded me that I had been to Pearl Street Warehouse. I had heard of it, and I didn't realize. I mean, I've been to Union Stage, I've been to the Anthem at the Wharf, but and I said to Church I had never been to Pearl Street Warehouse where he's coming to see a band. But my son told me after listening to the show that yes, you've been to Pearl Street Warehouse with me. All right,
and
thanks,
I work
Skip.
at Bethesda Theater, as you may know.
Yeah, I know you do.
Yeah. So I was
venue.
really into that conversation. I remember the Prince shows. Yes, I went to about 2 or 3 of them myself.
Yeah.
1984 at Purple Rain.
Capitol Center, Landover.
It
Unbelievable.
was great.
November. I remember it was right around Thanksgiving. Thanks, Skip.
Yes,
let's go to Ian. Ian, go ahead.
I have Washington in 4th.
Oh my God, I should have said it right before you said it because it was so predictable. All right, so go ahead. Give me the top 3 and then tell me why Washington's 4th.
Philly 1, Dallas 2, New York 3, and Washington 4. And here's why. I don't think Dan Quinn's going to be around long, so I think there's coaching uncertainty. You agree that the roster is 4th. I don't believe in the general manager's ability to find talent. And while I was a huge Jaden Daniels fan with you last year, I also think he's a blue tent guy. And look, the biggest concern I have for this franchise going forward is his ability to stay healthy, not just because of his body, but because of the hits he chooses to take. And that is number 1 panic button for me on this franchise, because he's got the ability, he's got everything you want in a leader quarterback, maybe not his mother, but he's got everything you want, and yet he just takes these car crash hits. You had Zabon, and he hammers that point, is this guy finds ways to take a hit that he doesn't need to on 2nd and 10, runs right into stuff. I can't believe in this franchise until that changes.
Okay, so number 1, I don't disagree with you. That would probably be near the top of my concern list when it comes to him specifically. The big concern right now, immediate, is they better find a really good defensive coordinator and they better add some really good defensive talent, because you can't win with the worst defense in modern recent NFL history with the way it played over the final 7-8 games. But I don't think he takes these car crashes that you talk about. RG3 took car crashes, over and over again. I'm not suggesting that I think he makes the wisest decisions all the time, but I think per usual, you get a bit hyperbolic. I don't think these are car crashes that he gets into. I didn't like, as you know, the Kingsbury designed run package with him. I hope the next guy doesn't have that as part of it, but he has to be able to run. He's got to be able to take some chances. It's what makes him so special and so great.
I agree with you about his need to run to make the offense work. I agree with you. But when we talk about car crashes, etc., just in the Minnesota game, when he got pushed by Van Ginkel, that to me, his body looked like it was in a car crash. He flew
that one did.
16 feet.
That one did. Yeah, well, I mean, he probably should have made the wise decision not to chase Van Ginkel down. But he's, that was the competitor in him taking over. I'm up against a hard break. I got to run. Ben Fox from Yahoo Sports covers sports betting. I follow Ben on Twitter all the time. He writes well. He tweets well. We've had him on the show before, but it's been a while. He's going to join us next to preview these 4 games over the weekend and the national championship game. Ben Fox is the senior sports betting analyst at Yahoo Sports. We've had Ben on the show before. He does a great job. I read Ben all the time. I follow Ben on X at bfox. That's FAWKES 22 on Twitter. Always has great betting information, great betting nuggets. And we'll get to some of those for not only the 4 divisional round games this weekend, but the championship game Monday night between Indiana and Miami. But I'm reading in your Twitter byline that you are Brooklyn born, but a fan of all teams Minnesota. So it's a bit timely here. We had Paul Charchian on yesterday. Charch comes on with us every week. He's a big Minnesota guy. And there's a possibility it may be remote. But if you're a Vikings fan, tell me about Brian Flores, because he interviewed here the other day for the DC job.
Yeah, definitely. Always good to have Charch on. Know him from the FSPA days as well. So always a good guest. I mean, I'm hoping that he is using this kind of as leverage as opposed to places he actually wants to go, because no offense to the Commanders defense, but I'm not sure why you would be choosing that over everything that's in Minnesota and the system they have and the players who know the system and all of that. But he's just elevated, I think, a defense that, if you actually look at it, Minnesota doesn't have that many blue chip players, right? I mean, they're relying on, whether or not Harrison Smith comes back, we'll see, but they have some very solid players, and Van Ginkel and, Jonathan Grenard, Blake Cashman at the linebacker spot, but they haven't really had like a shutdown corner. Byron Murphy is good since like Xavier Rhodes, right? So It isn't a defense you look at like the Texans or something or the Seahawks and you say, hey, it's this combination of coaching and all these great players. It's really the coaching and the scheme. And you saw it especially in games against sometimes those like rookie quarterbacks. They played well against the Bears and other, he really likes those matchups against Ben Johnson, right? And other great offensive play callers. So he's done an unbelievable job. I think the players love him. I think Kevin O'Connell loves him. It would be a massive, massive loss for Minnesota, just because I think the marrying of the players and the scheme in Minnesota has worked so well for that defense. I think it would carry over wherever he goes. Remember, he's also the coordinator or the head coach, I believe, who had that plan against Lamar Jackson a couple years ago, where they were, blitz on like 80% of the plays, right? Lamar playing the Miami Dolphins had a horrible game. So he's just a really good defensive mind. I think he'll be great wherever he goes. Selfishly, obviously, I hope that stays in Minnesota.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see how it plays out. So before we get to these games, I do just want your immediate thoughts on the big story yesterday. 39 players, 17 NCAA Division I teams, point shaving, investigated and a federal indictment handed down. You cover sports betting. We both kind of understand what it's become since the legalization of it, now several years ago. But what's your reaction? I'm sure you've talked about this story from yesterday.
Yeah, I think anytime we have this story, so first of all, as Charlie Baker, the NCAA president, had said, a lot of this information is not new, right? So this isn't a scandal that happened yesterday and, oh my God, this is shocking. This is something that had been investigated. It's an unsealed indictment. And some of this had kind of been, I would say, in the gambling industry, people questioning certain college games, why certain point spreads were going a certain way, why it seemed like certain teams weren't playing to the best of their ability. And so some of this was, I think, rumored, just in the fact that especially now, post-legalization, post-2018, and with the rise of social media, it's really hard for something in the betting world not to get noticed. Both the sports books and integrity monitoring systems, and then just people watching the games, betting the games, and putting together a clip and saying, hey, wait a second, this doesn't really seem to add up. I think from the actual point shaving and the allegations, the thing that's more troubling is just that this is something that's impacting the integrity of these games, right? In a way that you could make an argument, let's say the Guardians pitcher with, Manuel Clase, whether or not you should have the market available to even bet on the first pitch being a ball or a strike is a different question, but that's not necessarily impacting the integrity of the game, right? If it's a 6-2 game, it's the ninth inning and he throws the first pitch as a ball, the Guardians, if they're winning, they're probably still winning that game. It's probably not having a giant impact on the game. This is different just because players are accepting money to play differently than they otherwise would, right? And so regardless
let me just be clear on something, because I actually don't know the answer to this. Was this actual point shaving, relative to the game point spread, or was it prop bet fixing?
Yeah, so that's a difference. A lot of this, and I will say I haven't read through the entire 70-page indictment yet, but from reading other articles as well, a lot of it is the point spread, right, or the first half for some of these games. And so, but it's the team wide. It's not like, hey, it's this player, like Jonte Porter in the NBA, right? It was his individual point spread, his points, his assists, et cetera. He can control that. This was more the team. And in some cases as well, the point, fixers allegedly, they lost, right? Because sometimes the team plays too well, right? Or the other team doesn't cooperate in the way that they are hoping. And so it's not like it's also a sure thing, which is why in the NBA, they were going after the player specific, right, and their points, because, hey, if you're Jonte Porter, you have a pretty good chance of controlling how many points or assists you get. Right. Whereas the team, if you cover the first half spread, it also matters how the other team is shooting, playing, how your guys are playing. Not everyone knows about it. So this was, yes, a lot more on the point spread, some in the first half, some in the full game. But I think the widespread nature, right, you're talking about 17 different colleges, as well as 4 players who were alleged in this who did play as recently as last week, right? These allegations were from previous seasons, but I think that it's the widespread nature of it, and just the fact that, again, this is impacting the full scope of the games, even if it's low-level D1 games. The games didn't go how they were supposed to. It's not necessarily on the up and up. That's what we can't have in sports, because that is the integrity of the game.
You said something about that is so true, and I've always thought about this from the perspective of the sports books have always been the integrity keepers when it comes to this. Even before the legalization of sports betting, sports books were the ones that noticed trends and would identify them and report them to the proper authorities, let the sports know about it, which is why, remember early on in the legalization of sports betting days when, the NFL and Major League Baseball and the NHL, they were like, we're going to charge these, online sporting betting companies, integrity fees. No, they're the ones that are keeping the integrity, not you. But in the list of schools, and I think you'll appreciate this, in the list of schools that have been mentioned, because you said something about big and wild point spread moves. Over the years, as somebody who's bet a lot of college basketball, a lot of college sports, and I'm not being, this isn't specific, but it's these kinds of schools, a New Orleans Northwestern State game is where you would see, a game go from pick'em to -7 in like 2 hours. And you'd be like, what just happened there? That typically, not typically, it would never happen unless there was a big injury or something in a Duke Carolina game, right?
Totally. And also it's all incumbent, right, on how much money is in the pot and who's betting, right? And so for those low-level games, generally the only people who are going to be betting those are professional bettors, right, or alums, right? There's not a lot of people, the general public, is going to say, hey, there's 300, there's 100 college basketball games on this Saturday. I'm really focused on Northwestern State against this other team. You're going to be betting Duke Carolina as a casual fan. So if someone who does do well on college basketball bets into that game, they're going to move it a lot faster than they would otherwise. And that's why you see some of those movements. Or you see potentially, like we've seen in some other things, if there isn't any buyback on the other side and it keeps moving, then we start asking questions about why that's the case. Because at a certain point, it's too much, right? In the NFL, we'll talk about some of the games, right? If that Seahawks 49ers, it was -7, then -8, then -10, then -14. At some point, people are going to bet on the 49ers because it's too high a spread. if no one's betting on the 49ers, that's the issue. And that's what we're seeing in some of these college games.
Well, the other thing, too, is when you do get a lot of action on one side and the books don't move the number, there's a message in that, too. But, I was just thinking about, like, even in college football, betting it so many years, like it was never, Bama, LSU, but it was a North Texas, Arkansas State game where it was like, wait a minute, the line just went from +3 to, North Texas was just +3, and now all of a sudden they're a 4.5-point favorite. And
right.
And it wasn't injury related. So those things would happen, and they would be eye openers for the books and everybody else. All right, let's talk about these games this weekend. You're one of those that focuses on, public action, whether it's tickets, whether it's actual dollar amount, and you write about that a lot. This is a week in which I'm curious as to what game you think has the most public action and sort of the perception that it's going to go one way more than another of the four.
Yeah, I think the one I've spent the most time on because I think it's fascinating is 49ers Seahawks. So BetMGM, this is the game right now. And again, it is a Saturday game, so you would expect there to be a couple more tickets on it. But the Niners to cover, which now +7, down from 7.5, is the most bet side of all four games. So that is the one that people have, the most wagers on. Obviously, I think a lot of times with this divisional round weekend, what I've always cautioned people is you tend to forget why the team got the bye, right? Because they're a very good team. And we're like, oh, the Niners, they just went into Philadelphia
Recent
and
impressions,
upset them. And they did, right? They were 5.5-point underdogs. That line moved a lot. There was a lot of sharp action on the Eagles. Like that surprised respected bettors. This is difficult
went from 4
for
to 5, 5.5, 6, right?
Exactly. Got up to 6, settled back at 5.5. This did open 6.5, got pushed up to 7.5 at a lot of books. And for the 49ers, I thought that was interesting. At 7.5, that would be the second largest underdog they've been in a playoff game in their franchise history. So obviously, you
tweeted out what number one was, and I would have gotten it actually because Washington was a 10-point favorite over the 49ers in the 83 championship game played in January of 84 at RFK Stadium. And by the way, Ben, I don't know if you know this, Washington had a 21-0 lead in that game, and Montana brought him back in the second half, tied it, and then Mosley kicked a field goal to win it with about 2 minutes to go. But that was the biggest underdog they had ever been in a postseason game.
That's great perspective because all I saw was the box score that it was 24-21, and that was just before my time. So I wasn't watching that game, but I know those Washington teams were amazing. For this game though, it's just we've seen this game now. This is the third time, right? In week one, the 49ers and Seahawks played. The 49ers ended up winning. They had 24 first downs, 384 yards of offense, 7 of 14 on third down. They basically only won because Jake Moody missed a short field goal. Another one got blocked. They had the ball for 38 minutes. Then we saw week 18. Instead of 24 first downs, they had 9. Instead of 384 yards of total offense, they had 173, 2 of 9 on third down. And the Seahawks had the ball for 38 minutes. They only won 13-3, but they completely dominated that game. And to me, that was a couple weeks ago when the 49ers were on the equivalent rest as the Seahawks, and also were less injured than they currently are. So it's difficult for me to see how the 49ers can keep this game close. Sam Darnold, though, right, just popped up yesterday with an oblique injury. He's now officially questionable, not probable, like questionable to play in the game. And I think also, we've just seen this later in the season. He hasn't played as well. In the first 10 weeks, he led the league in QBR. The last 8 weeks, he was 27th, right? So he hasn't played as well lately. The defense has still been good, maybe not as good as they were. The Niners just have so many injuries. And so it's sitting there at a touchdown. It still kind of seems cheap, but now you have a potential quarterback injury for the Seahawks, which to me is like the only path here where, Darnold doesn't play well. He throws an interception. or potentially with an oblique. I've had that. I mean, that could flare up in the second quarter. He might not be able to play, and then you have Drew Lock for the rest of the game. So that's a massive, massive thing that if that didn't pop up, I would have no qualms betting the Seahawks to win and to cover. I still think that they would win the game. But, man, that's really throwing a wrench in the plans there with that Darnold injury.
Well, the way you're talking, you're reminding me, because I know I've had you on the show before. I think we think very similarly. I'm very much sort of an anti-public contrarian, but try to be on the sharp side. And I looked at this line when it first came out, and I said, I know I'm gonna have Seattle laying the number, because I figured that, recent impressions are big, as you know, with NFL public bettors, and the 49ers just won, and the Seahawks, people don't even remember week 18. I will say, too, that the first game was week 1, which is always a bit of a head fake in the NFL. I mean, the Raiders beat the Patriots in Foxborough in week 1. The week 18 game, as you said, felt more like 30-3 than 13-3. That was domination, pure domination, and they did it running the football, really. And just couldn't close in the red zone. They missed a couple of field goals. So I'm just curious, do you think it dropped from 7.5 to 7 because of Darnold, or is it sharp money on the 49ers?
I think that's more Darnold than necessarily the sharp. I think the early sharp money pushed it up from 6.5 to 7.
Yeah, I agree.
But I think with that, and again, we could see that bump back up to 7.5. I would be surprised if this got below 7, unless we had some more information about Darnold and that injury, or wasn't able to practice today. But it is just, I'll say too, Sam Darnold as a favorite in his career of 6 points or more, a perfect 13-0.
Wow.
Straight up 10-3 against the spread. So,
well, they did run the football very effectively in week 18, something they didn't do consistently during the year. And I don't know why they didn't do it, because I think both of those backs are really good. And I think they should be trying to take the pressure off Sam Darnold, so we don't see him, do what he did last year against the Vikings in the season finale, and then against the Rams in the postseason. We're talking to Ben Fox from Yahoo Sports. I would urge all of you to give him a follow on Twitter and read him if you're into sports betting. He does a great job at bfox22. So from a public perception standpoint, Josh Allen in Buffalo, that was the performance of the weekend. One of the great performances, I think, in recent memory for a quarterback, because Jacksonville was the better team in that game. And I think people are not big Bo Nix fans in general. So is this a one-sided Buffalo over Denver play for the public?
Yeah, so this one has been a little more split. I do think that ultimately more tickets and probably more money will be on the Bills, but it's kind of in that 60% range. Yep. And right now at BetMGM, they sent out this morning, 51% of the bets Bills, 49% Broncos, 58% of the money on the Bills. So we have seen this favorite flip as well. A lot of books, it was Bills -1, -1.5, or potentially pick 'em, and has shifted to generally a consensus of the Broncos 1 or Broncos 1.5 as a favorite. It is interesting. The spread is interesting regardless of who's favored. If it does flip back and the Bills are favored, it would only be the third time since 1970 that a 1 seed was a home underdog in the divisional round.
What are the other two?
The other two, one was, 1971, my Vikings against the Cowboys.
Okay.
And then 2017, which I think a lot of people would remember, the year we don't speak of as Vikings fans, the Nick Foles-led Eagles against the Falcons. Right. They were a 2.5-point home underdog as that number 1 seed in a very rare situation where the starting quarterback gets hurt right before the playoffs and the bye. But it's a very rare situation. Ultimately, you're betting in this game, right? You have the best player clearly with Josh Allen against, I think, especially with all the injuries, you would probably say the better team with the Broncos, right? With home field advantage, with rest. That's kind of what you're dealing with. For the Bills, what concerns me, and as a fan, not as an analyst, I'll root for the Bills, because as a Vikings fan, I like, those long-suffering teams, if they haven't won it in a while, and the Vikings aren't in it.
Don't you want company? Don't you want company on the 4 Super Bowl loss thing?
They've suffered so much. That's
I
fine.
don't know.
They
I don't know if
it.
I'd want my team to be the last team that's 0 for 4.
Yeah, we still got the Lions. We got there's some other long-suffering fan bases. Yeah, exactly. But the Bills, you have now Gabe Davis out, Tyrell Shavers out. On the defense, Jordan Poyer out. You're not sure if Terrell Bernard's going to play. Maxwell Harrison out. So the injury is kind of mounting, and that's not to mention everything. Josh Allen already had a foot injury. Then he had the knee. Then he had the finger that got banged up. He was checked for a concussion off of one of those plays. So ultimately, does he have enough? Can they stitch enough together to win this game? Potentially, I think I lean Broncos just because of that rest advantage and Sean Payton. And it's interesting, the Broncos, talking to odds makers before the playoffs, basically I always try and get their power ratings. The Rams were number 1, the Seahawks were number 2. The Broncos weren't in either top 5 of all the playoff teams. A big reason for that is because the Broncos this season 10-2 straight up as a favorite, but 3-9 against the spread. So they won a lot of those games. Remember, right, that Jets game, the Giants game, Raiders on Thursday night. They won a lot of those games. They looked very unimpressive doing it and didn't cover the spread. So that's what odds makers are reacting to as opposed to just the kind of gaudy, straight up record. Because ultimately that's kind of what boils down to whether or not they'll win and cover some of these games. So it's a really interesting game. I do lean the Broncos just because I think they will have more and because the Bills are just so banged up.
Yeah, I mean, so far, I'm with you. I really am rooting for Josh Allen in particular, but I kind of like Denver. And, we had the first 4 last week underdogs cover in those first 4 wild card games. And, essentially we've got, a public lean on 2 dogs to start. What about the 2 games on Sunday?
Yeah, so I think to me, the biggest, this is personally the biggest coin flip is Texans Patriots.
Yeah.
I just see this could go either way. I think massive injury news that it looks like Christian Gonzalez is returning to practice and has a much better chance to play. And on the Texans side, that Nico Collins in concussion protocol hasn't practiced yet, seems very unlikely to play. I think for certain teams, there's players that have an outsized impact, right? We saw that last week with the Niners and Eagles, where Trent Williams, we kind of expected him to play, but he was questionable. He did play. Lane Johnson, questionable for the Eagles, didn't play. The Eagles are just a completely different team with or without Lane Johnson. And I think the Texans, I worry about that offense. This did open 2.5 at a lot of books, 3 at some books. It is at 3. I did see some 3.5 on the Patriots yesterday, which has come back. Some is juiced a little bit. Patriots 3 minus 120.
Yeah, I see that.
But the public is on the Patriots a bit at BetMGM, 58% of bets, 70% of the money on the Patriots. I tend to lean that way. I think it's even as good as that Texans defense is, just because of how C.J. Stroud looked, 5 fumbles. The only way that they were going to lose that game is if he had that type of performance, because the defense was going to shut down the Steelers. The Patriots have a lot more weapons. And at the same time, not necessarily speaking out of both sides of my mouth, Drake May had some concerning plays in that game on the same side, a couple of fumbles, holding the ball too long, doing things he did his rookie year that he didn't do this year in a potential MVP campaign. So he ended up making that great throw to Hunter Henry, touchdown pass, still looked very calm. It just made some of those mistakes that against a better team, and certainly the Texans have a better defense. The Chargers defense is very good. That's why I'm not 100% in on the Patriots either. This just seems like a game where, to me, the under is probably where you want to be looking as opposed to necessarily the side.
Weather might be a factor in both of the games on Sunday. There could be some snow in Foxborough, the cold everybody's already been reading about in Soldier Field. But with respect to the total in the New England-Houston game, you know this, the public loves to play overs. They're easier to root for. But I have a sense, and I don't have everything in front of me right now, that this would be one in which the public might lean under. What are you seeing there?
For sure. We've seen some sharp action push it down a little bit. At BetMGM, it is 40.5, down from 42.5, but 75% of the bets sports books I'm seeing on the under, which is a rarity. As you said, the public tends to like to bet the over. It's the same way with same game parlays. They're generally not putting together a bunch of things not to happen, right? You know, Kyron Williams under 73 rushing yards and Matthew Stafford under 230 passing yards. They're betting on the overs. But this is that same game where you can see, right? The Texans defense, you just saw them, and the Patriots defense look great against the Chargers as well, who also don't have an amazing offense. You can see the Texans struggle on offense too. So it's not hard to get and see where, okay, I could see an under happening. And that's generally what the public likes to bet. If they can envision it, then it will come true.
All right. Chicago and the magical season they've had, and they're a 4-point dog, 3.5, 4-point dog at home Sunday night against the Rams, who are lucky to survive against Carolina. So what do you think about this one as it relates to the number?
Yeah, this is another one where right now it's going to be a public dog, right? So we're seeing 60% of the bets, kind of 60% of the money on the Bears. We have seen this number come down. Did open 4.5, Rams -4.5 in some books at -4, pushed down to -3.5. The total also has come down. I think some had even opened at 51, down to 48.5 at some of those books with those weather concerns. And this is another game kind of like the Niners and the Seahawks, where you look at it statistically, and the Rams haven't necessarily played as well. As I mentioned, they're the highest power rated team by odds makers. Basically the second half of the season going on, they haven't played as well the last few weeks. Whereas the Bears, you just look at it and they're kind of outmatched statistically in just about every category, right? Like the Rams are a better overall team, they're the number 1 offense by DVOA, the number 9 defense. And as good as Chicago's running game has been by the advanced metrics, the Rams is actually better. Ben Solak at ESPN had a great stat that since 2016, according to NFL Next Gen stats, the only 2 teams that have had success rates running the ball of over 50% were both the Rams. One was the 2018 Rams that went to the Super Bowl, 50.13%, and this year's team is 50.12%. So really good running the ball. You have Devontae Adams, you have Puka Nacua, arguably the best wide receiver in the league. They have a pass rush. Their defense hasn't played as well. The Bears thrive on turnovers, and the Bears also just, you don't know what you're going to get, right? That first half of last game, it was like, all right, are we booking the vacation, right? I mean, what is going on with this game? It's 21-3. About the only thing the Packers didn't do well in that was kick the field goal at the end of the half and set that up. Otherwise, it was about a perfect half, scoring touchdowns on their first 3 drives. And then the second half, it was completely different. Caleb Williams, is hitting passes down the field. The defense is getting 3 and outs. And so they're just a tough team to pin down. Ultimately, it's a question of, do the Rams clearly have more talent? They're both great coaching staffs. The Rams have been there, whereas the Bears haven't. It's tough not to take the Rams, but I think I do lean still the Bears getting 3.5, because it just seems like even if they're down 10 late, you would like them to score that late touchdown. You would believe in that more than the Rams kind of putting away some of these games. And one of the Rams' only kind of weaknesses that we've seen is they do really struggle in like power rushing situations. So 3rd and short, 4th and short, around the goal line. And that is some of the, rushing you're going to need to have to close out games. They don't have a tush push, right? They don't have something else like that. So they are the better team. That's why they're favored on the road. But I do think that cold weather and also Stafford's finger, right? It's another thing we're not sure. It's a sprained finger, not broken. But if it's 8 degrees out or whatever it's going to be, that's not going to feel good for a cold finger, especially if and when it does get hit. So it's a game I still think the Rams find a way to win. I probably lean the Bears to cover though.
What would be the number in an AFC championship game between Houston and either Buffalo or Denver? They would host Buffalo. They would go to Denver. If Houston goes into Foxborough and does defensively what they've done to several teams this year, I mean, that would be the most impressive win for them this year if they go in and do that on the road as a dome team on the road. Would they actually be, they'd be favored over Buffalo at home, but is it possible they'd be favored at Denver?
So sportsbooks do put out now. They've got a lot better about putting out those hypothetical lines. So the Patriots, if they win, they would Patriots and Broncos. It would be Broncos -1.5. If the Bills were at the Patriots, it would be Patriots -1.5. If it was Bills at the Texans, the Bills would be a road favorite. Bills -1.5.
Really? They'd be a road favorite after getting pummeled in November.
Yeah. I mean, that again, just one.
What's the number? 1.5?
1.5. Yeah.
All right. What about Denver, Houston?
And then Denver 1.5 point favorite over Houston.
I wonder if that would change if Houston was super impressive in a win against the Patriots on the road Sunday. It might.
Oh, for sure. Yeah.
Ben, awesome. Really enjoyed having you on. Hope you're well. Enjoy the football this weekend.
Anytime. Thanks so much.
Ben Fox, everybody from Yahoo Sports. Kevin Sheehan Show, the Team 980 and the team980.com. We'll preview the 4 games. By the way, I forgot to ask Ben about Monday night. We kind of went long. He's really good. I follow him and I read him a lot. And we've had him on the show before. But I texted him during the break and I said, I totally forgot to ask you about the national championship game. And I asked him, can they make a number big enough to get people to play Miami? And he just said, I don't think so. It's total one-way traffic at almost every sports book on Indiana. People don't want to get in front of that train, even if the number's inflated. I mentioned yesterday, I think with Denton, that there were some 9s and 9.5s out there, Max. I mean, Indiana had gone from 7.5 to 9 or 9.5. It's back to 8.5 today, pretty much everywhere. So, sharp bettors and even public bettors were like, okay, 9.5, 9 is a bit much against Miami. So it got bought back. But that's one of the toughest games because I think I'm going to give out Miami in the smell test. I would have rather given them out at 9.5 or 9, but that's not going to be the number today. But it's really hard, as Ben just texted me, to get in front of that train right now. So I may hold off and then tweet that pick out on Monday because we're not doing a show on Monday. Anyway, for those of you that care about the betting aspect of Monday night, I mean, that is a team right now, Indiana, that people are convinced cannot be beat. And yet Miami is stylistically maybe the team that would match up best with them in the trenches. Can they run the football? Can they stop the run? It's going to be pretty interesting. So I wanted to, I don't know how many people saw this story. Mike DeFabo from The Athletic wrote a story with all of the details of Mike Tomlin's final speech on Monday. Not Monday. They played on Monday night. I'm sorry, on Tuesday, to his team, saying that he was leaving the organization. If you had any doubts as to Mike Tomlin's popularity among his players and the organization, I'm going to read from some of this. It was basically a story that detailed his final address to the team. And it went as follows. On Tuesday, moments before news broke that Mike Tomlin was resigning as the Pittsburgh Steelers head coach, Tomlin held one last meeting with his players to let them know before the rest of the world found out. The reaction was a mixture of shock and sadness for the entire Steelers roster, no more so than for the team's 2 biggest stars, quarterback Aaron Rodgers and outside linebacker TJ Watt. In an inside story about Tomlin's final address to the team, he said the following. He said, this is what he told the players, or he stood in front of his players and began the meeting by saying, in the business of the NFL, there are consequences for not doing your job. As a professional in this business, you have to live with those consequences. Some of us will be here next year. Some of us won't. And then he said, guys, I want you to hear this from me first. I just met with Art Rooney and Omar Khan, the general manager. I think it's best for the organization for me to step down. And apparently, right when he started to say that, TJ Watt yelled out, no, 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 no. He kept repeating it over and over again as his eyes welled up with tears. Watt has discussed his respect and admiration for Tomlin on numerous occasions in the past. That included 2 years ago when he said publicly on locker cleanout day, it was huge in my contract talks. I don't want to play for anyone other than Mike T. As Tomlin spoke, Joey Porter Jr. was almost hyperventilating. The son of a Steelers legend, he has known the coach longer than almost anybody in the locker room and grew up with Tomlin's son. In some ways, Tomlin is more like an uncle than a coach to Porter. Tomlin said, I want it to be better for you guys because I care so much about you guys. When Tomlin finished his speech, every player in the room rose for a standing ovation. They could tell it meant a lot to Tomlin that he had the opportunity to break the news directly to his team. He seemed to be at peace with the decision, multiple players said. Then, in one of his signature moves, Tomlin tipped his cap and went to the door. One by one, every player walked past Tomlin, exchanging hugs. One staff member said, "It felt like a funeral. I teared up. It's like finding out that your dad died." When the meeting broke, no one knew what to do. They just sat there, stunned that a coach who had been the organization's one constant over 19 seasons was gone. Man, the detail, and there's a lot more to this, and the exit for Tomlin. A lot of the players said that they were caught completely off guard. They were very surprised, even though the outside noise was loud. They thought it was absurd when when the fans were chanting "Fire Tomlin" during a game, I think in late November, early December. That they just, the outside world doesn't get what he means to us, what he means to the inside of this building. But 1 year, Aaron Rodgers in that post game said that Mike Tease had more success than damn near anybody in the league for the last 19 to 20 years. More than that, though, when you have the right guy and the culture is right, you don't think about making a change. Inside the team meeting room on Tuesday, Rodgers, through sobs, mustered a 2-word message to deliver to his coach. "I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I'm sorry," Rodgers told Tomlin. Rodgers, said, we're going to get a playoff win this year. And they got there. They won 10 games. They won the division, but ultimately it was no different than, the same results that Mason Rudolph and Kenny Pickett and Russell Wilson and the other quarterbacks since Ben Roethlisberger stopped being Ben Roethlisberger because of injuries at the end of his career. Ultimately, they ran into a buzzsaw, though, on Monday night. I mean, Lombardi and Marino weren't beating the Texans on Monday night with the way they were playing defense. It is the stuff that we hear about, but we don't understand the impact of as fans. And I read from the story in part because, all I heard towards the end of our team season this year was the locker room didn't look or feel anything like, the 2023 locker room or the 2022 or the 2021 or the 2020. Well, the 2020, they went to the playoffs. 2019, 2018, that there was a complete different feel culturally, that, this was still a team that was together, that believed in its head coach, that believed in the organization, and probably understood why, intellectually, why they went 5-12 this year. And it's hard, and I've said this all year, and I know many of you disagree, so be it, you won't convince me otherwise. It's hard to put the blame on anybody specifically for this season. Nobody endured what they endured injury-wise this season, and it's the worst injury season in terms of its top-line starters in franchise history. So, yeah, Tomlin's culture was massive. It also, gives you insight on what, the Rooney family will be looking for in its next hire. They got to find somebody that gets that culture and that can continue that culture. The culture that Chuck Noll started, that Bill Cowher took on, and then ultimately that Mike Tomlin had for 19 years. I know that a lot of Steeler fans, Big Tony's a friend of mine, and Big Tony's the biggest Steeler fan that I know. And he has been super frustrated with Tomlin in recent years. And I think he's thrilled that they're moving on. But fans' perspective is often very different than those that are there every day with these individuals. And wow, that probably was an incredibly emotional exit and speech. Tomlin, there's something about Tomlin that is really difficult not to like, man. That guy has it together from a leadership standpoint. You can just tell. Maybe not the X's and O's, but that's where you get in when you're talking about coaches, is like there's so many aspects to being a great coach. And a lot of this stuff that makes certain coaches great isn't the stuff we see. We see, what are you doing going for that 4th and 4 from your own 42-yard line? Why'd you go for 2 there? Why would you possibly get away from the run? All of those things, but there's so much more to that. At the college level, even more so, because the players are so young, they're so immature, and you've got recruiting involved. And now, paying players on top of that. All right. Coming up, we will preview all 4 games. Ben Standig will join us at noon. I'll have a smell test at the end of the show as well. Kevin Sheehan Show, the Team 980, theteam980.com. We are free and live on the Odyssey app. And don't forget, you can actually watch the show on our Team 980 YouTube channel. Just hit the subscribe button and hit the like button when you get there.
Yeah, we talked about this, I think, at the trade deadline last time I talked. It is hard to find great players in the NFL, and AJ is a great player. I think from my perspective, that's what we're going out and looking for when we go out here in free agency in the draft, is trying to find great players who love football, and he's that guy. So I think that would be my answer.
Howie Roseman is a smart man. Asked about the possibility of moving on from A.J. Brown. You don't talk about him potentially being available if he is. That hurts your leverage in going out to trade him. Here's the problem the Eagles have with A.J. Brown. He's got a $72 million dead cap hit to the team if they trade him or move on from him. Now, they can spread that out over 2 years, but that's a massive, massive number. I asked a friend of mine to give me the Pro Football Focus number on A.J. Brown from the game against the 49ers. It was the second lowest on the team in the game. He was truly fraudulent in that game. There was no effort. That's why Sirianni was yelling at him on the sideline. He short-armed and did not lay out for 2 long throws from Jalen Hurts that were both catchable. And then in the fourth quarter, in a meaningful drive, dropped one wide open over the middle. A.J. Brown's dominated games before. We've seen it during his career. He's a very good receiver. No thank you. No thank you. Not even with Terry and Jaden. And maybe you would say, yeah, but he'd be really excited and he'd be easy in the first year or two. That guy quit on his team in a playoff game. Legitimately quit. Well, actually didn't quit, didn't show up. Those are things that stick for a long time, man. They stick for a long time. I remember a playoff game between the Bears and the Saints with Mitch Trubisky at quarterback. And I'll never forget that game because there were 2 fourth down plays that the Bears decided to go for it. Midfield, game was still, within reach. And Trubisky literally ran out of bounds on a 4th and 3, a full yard of the sticks rather than lay out and take a hit in a playoff game. Did it twice. And I remember saying, that's the kind of thing that I would imagine with a scout. Fans, everybody can agree. You can't have that. You cannot have that in your biggest games. You have to find players that can, even if disappointed, even if not feeling great about their situation, that they give it their all on game day, especially in the playoffs. That was a disgusting performance by A.J. Brown. I'd be incensed if I were an Eagle fan. I can only imagine what WIP, did after the game, post-game callers all week. But Howie Roseman handles it the right way. It's hard to find great players in the NFL, and AJ's a great player. That's you don't talk about it being easy to move on from A.J. Brown. You talk about, we're not interested in moving on from A.J. Brown. You never, publicly undermine or lessen your leverage. But I don't know that they have any with that cap hit, with that dead cap hit. You can spread it out. If he's truly a cancer and they can't have him back, you eat it, I guess, over the next 2 years. They can get out after next year in a much easier way. But I think A.J. Brown's back in Philadelphia next year with that dead cap number, for sure. Ben Standig next. Ben Standig is with us every Monday and Friday, and sometimes in between. Follow him on X at Ben Standig. Read his Substack column. He covers the team very well. It's called Last Man Standing, same name of his podcast. So, where are we on Brian Flores or anybody else as it relates to the defensive coordinator slot that is still available?
Yeah, I don't know that we're anywhere quite yet. Obviously, I think a lot's going to depend on how quickly these head coaching situations get resolved. We believe John Harbaugh's going to the Giants. They just haven't announced it yet. And then, a lot of things can flow from there. There are teams, I'm sure, waiting to speak with people who are still in the playoffs. Obviously, half of those teams will be eliminated by this weekend. So that could clear things up. And, like Brian Flores, is he going to get a head coaching job? I mean, I would probably doubt it, but he has had interviews and he could be in the mix. And same thing with Jim Schwartz in Cleveland. And so until the head coaching situations get resolved, I don't know that we're going to have too much momentum here on the defensive coordinator hire. I mean, look, it's possible they could just, somebody else who's available right now, they could just say, sure, let's go, who maybe has no impact on anything else. But for the most part, I think all these things are tied in right now.
Who's in play right now? I mean, we know that Patrick Graham and Joe Cullen and Brian Flores and Jonathan Gannon. Has the Gannon interview taken place yet?
That was yesterday.
Okay.
They also met with Carl Scott, who is, I think, the DB coach for Seattle. Passing, I think he's also the passing game coordinator there. So yeah, they've met with those people, but as far as we know, and I think to me, the Jeff Ulbrich, the defensive coordinator for Atlanta, who Quinn worked with when he was in Atlanta, and Raheem Morris, obviously the former Bucs head coach who was just let go, who also worked with Quinn. To me, I just still think that with all the change happening on offense, new coordinator, somebody who's never done that job before, I have to imagine that Dan Quinn's going to spend more time helping the offense this year or just making sure it's all running smoothly. And therefore, he wants to leave the defense to somebody who not only has done the job, but maybe he's extra comfortable with. That's why I keep thinking it's somebody from his coaching tree. But Ulbrich has not been made available yet until Atlanta makes their head coaching hire and they, determine if he's going to stay or not. And so that's kind of why we're in this waiting game. Raheem Morris has had head coaching interviews. So I think that's kind of where we're.
So is your prediction right Jeff Ulbrich?
My prediction is somebody from Quinn's tree, and Ulbrich would seem to be probably the top of that list. But I'm just imagining somebody from his tree makes more sense based on everything else going on than a completely new system, somebody he hasn't worked with, things like that.
A few days removed from the Blau elevation, has it become clear that he was just the guy all along? That, Mike McDaniel, Stefanski, really didn't matter who necessarily was out there, that this was part of the overall decision, is that they had this guy in the building that they didn't want to lose?
I mean, I don't think it'd be wrong to interpret it that way, right? I mean, whether or not Dan Quinn thought, say, Mike McDaniel would be available at the time that he made a decision on Kingsbury, he then did become available. And, again, McDaniel's waiting to get other head coaching opportunities, or he's being interviewed so he could get hired, by somebody. And I guess, if Blau starts to, if Detroit says, hey, come here for an interview, all of a sudden the wheels could be in motion and Washington might be too late to stop it. So they may have just decided, hey, we like this a lot. We're not that confident that McDaniel would definitely come to us over, say, Detroit or Baltimore, what have you. I know Baltimore, I don't think was even open yet when they hired Blau, but you know what I mean. Whatever the opportunities are available, some of the other opportunities, even for offensive coordinators, are going to be more attractive to some of these guys, even with Jaden Daniels here. So, yeah, I think they just, hey, we like this. And look, I think we all harped on the fact that Blau has no even position coach experience, let alone this. So if say Cliff had just stayed for whatever the reason, and then he, after this next year, is gone for whatever the reason, then we could say, hey, Blau, he coached the quarterbacks last year. I think they're just jumping ahead. Okay, so fine, we're just going to skip that year, move ahead, and this is where we feel comfortable going anyway. So I think that's kind of how they got there. Again, in a different world where maybe a McDaniel or somebody is, it's more they have fewer choices, but in a year with 9 head coaching opportunities and then pretty much all offensive coordinator openings on top of that, there's just way too much competition out there.
You said something, and it didn't get past me, and I just want to go back to it. That Quinn would hire somebody like Ulbrich in part because he could just turn it over and he wouldn't have to be involved at all, so he could focus a little bit more on offense. What did you mean by that?
Well, not that he's going to be calling plays or things along those lines, but, it is a new experience, and he is the head coach, right? I mean, he's got we know he's a defensive-minded guy, but he's, his responsibilities cover everything. So, I would think that certainly like in, over the offseason that he's going to be a little more hands-on on that side of the ball. He's not just going to, hey, give me an update, what's going on. I would imagine he's going to be there to make sure everything is running smoothly. I mean, they still, if they're going to, they still have not hired a sort of a veteran, former coordinator type guy. I know Brian Johnson's on staff. Maybe that's him. But we'll see now that, he didn't get the OC job where his feelings are at. But I'm just imagining just generally, if you have a new hire at a very important position, you may want to pay more attention to that side of the ball than you had before. So
yeah, I mean, you told me on Monday, and I was very intrigued by it. Just the idea that they could bring in like Darrell Bevel as a senior offensive, consultant, or whatever the title would be. Do you think that's still in play even after they hired DJ Williams to be the QB coach?
Well, I think it just depends on the Brian Johnson situation. Like, I mean, he could be that guy, right? He's been a coordinator. He's a former quarterback. He's done all these things. So he would be an easy one. He's obviously already been in the building. He and Blau have worked together, so that would be the easy one. Now, if he were to leave, not only would they have to sort of replace that spot. I mean, it's so weird now, right? When we were younger men, it was like the coaches were position coaches, the coordinators, and that's it. Now you have all these extra passing game coordinators on both sides of
well, plus these hires weren't even talked about. I mean, OC and DC were highlighted, but all of these other positions, unless they brought in Bill Arnsparger, which they did one year as a defensive consultant, and it was a big name, you didn't really know the. I mean, I say that, and like, everybody knew Joe Bugle, and Rennie Simmons and et cetera, but that was after a while.
Yeah, right. I mean, Bugle became celebrated in part because of the Hogs, and then he obviously went on to become a head coach. But yeah, so I'm just saying, like, I don't even know what position they technically have to replace to have what they think is a good enough staff. But you would imagine at a minimum, if Johnson were to go, which again, I don't know where his head's at, haven't been passed over, they at a minimum probably have to replace him. And then that would mean, I think, to me, would suggest this person would be helping out Blau as well, because right now Brian Johnson is the passing game coordinator / assistant head coach. The assistant head coach part, as Quinn laid out, was because Johnson has looked to be a head coach and give him the opportunity to kind of shadow him. Darrell Bevel, for just to use a name, who worked with Quinn in Seattle, I don't think is on that track anymore. So that would be more of like passing game quarter / mentor would be my assumption.
Okay, we're talking to Ben Standig. Whenever I get this far deep into, the coaching staff, I think that there's a lot of people that, don't necessarily care, but there are some that live in the weeds like this. So I'm going to, and I'm interested to a certain degree. They still have, we've talked about, the defensive coordinator position. They filled the quarterback's coach, but David Blau was an assistant quarterback's coach, so I don't know if that position is a position they have to fill. I do know this. They don't have an O-line coach, and they don't have a tight ends coach. Both of those guys are potentially gone. Well, the offensive line coach is. So what's the deal with the O-line coach? Let's start there, because that's an important hire for sure, more so than the assistant QB coach.
Well, let me actually stay on the assistant QB coach, because there's something here. I have not confirmed this, but Matt Zenitz, who does a good job of covering NFL and college for CBS Sports, he has Washington hiring former LSU and NFL quarterback Danny Etling.
Yeah, he was on LSU's team.
as assistant QB coach. Ironically, the two schools he played in college were Purdue and LSU, the two alma maters of Blau and Jaden Daniels.
he was with. I think he was with Blau. I think Blau replaced Etling or when he got hurt. But go ahead, Danny Etling.
Yeah, no. So that's just what it says. He's saying, you know, they're going to hire him as the assistant QB coach. And it's just, again, I'm just sort of getting this right now. It looks like his general profile seems very similar to David Blau in terms of, sort of, I don't even know if he's ever been coached at all, but he is, you know, if I say he was in the league, it was sort of the guy looks like he was maybe like a fourth string practice squad type guy. But yeah, so like I said, I have not confirmed this yet, so take it for what it's worth.
Etling went to LSU. Etling did not cross over with Jaden Daniels at LSU, everybody understands that. He was at LSU long before Jaden got there, long before Joe Burrow got there, a few years before. But he was the guy that left Purdue that I think opened up the opportunity for Blau to be the starter for Jeff Brom at Purdue. I think that's what it is. But go ahead. All right, so Danny Etling as an assistant QB coach, that's a report. What about O-line?
Yeah, I haven't heard too much about that. Again, I think all these things to some degree are connected. You know, if there's about to be 9 new head coaches, including Harbaugh, a bunch of staffs are going to get turned over, right? Because they're not necessarily going to want to keep everybody who was there. We've seen that here when Rivera and Quinn got hired. Like a couple of guys stayed, but not many. So, you know, who knows who's going to be made available? I don't know if there's somebody that Dan Quinn has had an eye on or that Blau would have some familiarity with that he would like. But, you know, again, I think that's kind of it feels like it's a waiting game part of this as well. You know, it's one thing to hire an assistant quarterbacks coach. That's not affected by anything else. It's another thing to hire these bigger positions. So my guess is that we're going to be in a bit of a holding pattern. But again, look, if somebody is out there that they're like, hey, we can do this right now, maybe they do it. But I would imagine it's sort of tied up with everything else.
Do you have, in your latest, and I've got it in front of me right now, you've got coaching predictions. You made head coaching predictions, and you've got sort of possibilities for some of the coordinators. When did you put this out? Did you put this out before the Harbaugh to Giants news?
Yeah, I mean, I to be honest, it felt like it was going to be trending in that direction. But yes, I was kind of thinking Atlanta because they didn't have a GM and that he could do what he wants. But yeah, that was okay before the news came out. Yeah,
you've got Stefanski to Atlanta. That's your guess. Jesse Minter to the Ravens. By the way, if Minter ended up in Baltimore as a defensive head coach, would that be the spot for Kingsbury?
It could very well be. I think it really is an interesting discussion right now of would you rather be a head coach for some teams or the offensive coordinator for some teams? In meaning, like, if maybe not to use Kingsbury as a specific example, but would you rather be the head coach for a team that is not very good, has had a bad track record, but you get to be the head coach, or go be OC for Lamar Jackson, Derrick Henry, or go to Detroit and be the OC with Jared Goff and Amon Ross?
What are those jobs? Those jobs, you wouldn't consider the Raiders to be that because of Mendoza at number one. You consider the Cardinals to be that. You consider the Dolphins to be that. That's an interesting way to look at it. I mean, I can't imagine somebody, but actually it's probably smart for, say, a Kingsbury or even a Mike McDaniel to say, yeah, it'd be better if I were the OC in Philadelphia this year as Mike McDaniel or in Baltimore than to be the head coach in Arizona, as an example, or Cleveland, as an example.
Yeah. I keep looking at it the way that, like, Nick Saban would he would bring in some famous person to be his OC year over year, Lane Kiffin, Steve Sarkisian.
Yep.
I'm sure Lane Kiffin and Sarkisian at that point of their careers could have gotten head coaching jobs. They would have just had to go down certain levels, and like, wait, I can do this at the highest level with it'll be a ton of exposure, and we're in the national title hunt, so we can be in the mix, and that'll help my cause. I would think if you're McDaniel or Kingsbury, probably like, this is my second job. The only job only other time I'm going to get a head coaching job. Do I really want to go to Arizona? They have no quarterback, assuming they get rid of Kyler Murray. Well, obviously Cliff's not going there, but am I going there with no quarterback and a shaky ownership? Am I going to Cleveland? I don't think they have a quarterback. You got the whole Deshaun Watson situation still, and ownership has not been great. Or I go to,
Detroit.
Pick one of these. Yeah, Detroit. You've got that situation.
Baltimore.
Even, Baltimore, even Atlanta to some degree, depending what you think of Michael Penix, because you've got those playmakers. The Raiders is the one that sort of straddles the line because obviously they've been a mess, but they have the number one pick in the draft.
Right.
So that would be different. But yeah, I think that's definitely part of this. I don't think some of these jobs are particularly good if you have that OC option.
Look, there's major coordinator turnover in our division. Obviously, Harbaugh's got to hire an OC and a DC. Todd Monken's been, a guy that's been talked about as following Harbaugh to New York, but they also have to hire a defensive coordinator. I think one of the more fascinating hires of this offseason is Philadelphia's OC hire. What do you think happens there?
Yeah, they've obviously had these very weird swings where the offense is either highly productive or just doesn't look like they're just stuck in first gear the whole time. This is one of those seasons. They're changing the coordinator. So I do kind of wonder, do they need to just get out of whatever they've been doing overall? It's not, maybe a similar question here with Dan Quinn and the defense. It's not the person, it's the system that they have to adjust. Again, Kingsbury would be a pretty significant change from what they do. McDaniel will have his own spin on things. So, yeah, to me, that would be, if I'm Philly, I think that is a move I would make. Their window is still open, of course, to contend for a Super Bowl, but we all know how these things go. It doesn't last forever. Strike now. And with the pieces that they have, the Jalen Hurts conversation is that's its own thing. But they obviously have the pieces in place. They just need to get more production. And I wonder if a new system would make sense, meaning a McDaniel or Kingsbury, somebody they would pursue.
Yeah, Dable is out there. That would make sense for Philly.
Yeah.
A friend of mine just texted me and said, "Don't forget about Eberflus is gone in Dallas. They need a defensive coordinator as well." Yeah, it'll be an interesting off season. That's for sure.
By the way, like to your point of the turnover in the division, David Blau is currently the second longest tenured offensive coordinator in the division because the Giants are technically don't have one, and obviously Philly.
Yeah. And really Dallas has an offensive, play calling head coach, clearly.
Right.
Who do you like in the games this weekend?
Who do I like in the games this weekend? I want to pick the Rams over the Bears, but I think I saw that the Rams have not played in conditions, temperatures lower than 50 degrees, and the weather in Chicago looks like an absolute nightmare. Like 20 degrees. There's like insane wind and stuff going on there right now. So I don't know how that works out. Sometimes the weather stuff gets overplayed, but I don't know if that one does. I still would pick the Rams, but it makes me a little more nervous to say the least. The other game is San Francisco, Seattle. Look, in terms of just winning, I think I would take Seattle. If you want the points, maybe I would go with San Fran because of the way they just constantly find ways to get it done. But I just think Seattle is such a well-rounded team. The Bills Broncos are so fascinating because Josh Allen is the best player, but the Broncos just have a fantastic defense. Is Bo Nix going to be able to avoid sort of the young quarterback mistakes? I'll go Denver, but it does feel like this is like Josh Allen's year on some level because no Mahomes, no Lamar, no Burrow. It's his chance to finally do it, but I'll probably go Denver. And then I think the Texans, their defense, I had Joe Theismann on my podcast yesterday, and we were just talking general stuff, and he goes, man, I'm going to tell you, I've watched this Houston defense. I know there was the 85 Bears and the Ravens. This defense should be starting to get talked about in that level. It is ferocious. So give me the Texans. I just have not been buying the Patriots. That's dumb on me. 15-3. So good for them. But I just think I'll go the Texans in that one, unless CJ Stroud just completely botches the game.
Their performance against Pittsburgh was a performance that kind of, I think, matched. Oh, no. I'm confused. The New England defensive performance against the Chargers, The points allowed, the rushing yards allowed, and the net yards passing were all the lowest since the 85 Bears. It's funny because I think the Texans remind me more of the 2000 Ravens than they do the 85 Bears. And the key for New England is not to let that defense score because they just seem to score a lot. That's when you know you got a good defense, when you can count on, 7 to 14 points from the defense scoring, not setting up scores, but actually scoring. All right. Enjoy the football this weekend. I'll talk to you Monday.
By the way, I did just confirm that the Etling hiring is happening. So there you go.
There you go. Breaking news right here with Ben Standig on the show. Appreciate it.
Yeah, man. See ya.
We'll preview the 4 divisional round games. When we come back, I'll finish up the show with a smell test for not only the 4 weekend games, but maybe Monday night as well.
The biggest plays and clutch moments.
Oh, look out! Touchdown! A miracle!
It's time to go around the NFL.
All right, Kevin, we start off with the first one. Best remaining quarterback in the postseason takes on one of the top defensive units in football. The Bills are down to just 3 wide receivers: Khalil Shakir, Brandon Cooks, who joined the team in November, and Keon Coleman, who was benched for 4 games as a healthy scratch. So Buffalo's got their work cut out for him. Meanwhile, big looming question in Denver: can RJ Harvey and Bo Nix dice up a mid-tier Bills defense? Broncos -1.5 or 1, where depending on where you find it, over under 45.5. The game kicks off at 4:30 p.m. on CBS. What do you got for this one?
Yeah, this is where, just in analyzing the game, it won't impact my pick and smell test pick when we get to it at the end of the show. But they haven't been the same team without J.K. Dobbins. J.K. Dobbins was having a really, really good season, and Buffalo can't stop the run. I think that was Jacksonville's biggest mistake last week, is they should have run the football more. ETN and company, they were running right through. The Virginia Tech rookie was having a big day. ETN was having a big day. They only had, I think, something like 10, 11 carries total, between the two of them. I think Denver will try to stick with the run, but it would be much better if they had J.K. Dobbins back there. RJ Harvey is more of a shifty, quick, finesse back. Yeah. And I like Harvey, and he's explosive. He was super explosive at UCF. Look, last week, that was a performance really, I don't want to say for the ages, because that would make it, a little bit, you could probably find 10 statistical games that were better than Josh Allen's game at Jacksonville. But they were outmatched last week on the road. That was a better team that they faced, and Josh Allen strapped the team to his back, literally, and led it to a win with a near flawless performance. And can he do it again? He'll need to do it again. Now, Bo Nix, and I don't think Denver's as good as Jacksonville. I don't, but their pass rush is. Look, the key to this game, remember last week I said going into that game, it's got to be a game for James Cook. And it wasn't.
Yeah.
It was not.
Josh Allen was the big rusher for him.
Yeah, he couldn't run. And I look at Denver, and I'm like, if you get into 3rd and longs against this team, you're done.
You're SOL,
with that pass rush. There's a reason, Ben Fox said this. People tend to forget after the first weekend, and you get to the second weekend, and you haven't seen the 2 number 1 seeds, and you kind of forget they're number 1 seeds for a reason. They won more games than anybody else. And Denver's at home, and it's going to have to be a Superman performance by Josh Allen. He's capable of it, but he doesn't have Gabe Davis. He doesn't have Shavers. He's banged up. Man, that was the other part last week. He was just beaten to a pulp at times, after throws, on runs. God, I'm rooting for him, but I think I'm going to probably have Denver in the smell test, just because there is a lot of Buffalo action. I hope he can do it. I think he can do it, but I don't think ultimately he will. This is a hard one to pick.
It is.
Really hard one to pick, because I'm not a big Bo Nix guy.
Can't be.
But, man, their defense is good, and they're at home, so I kind of like, Denver in like a 24-21 kind of a game, which would give them the cover.
Yeah,
what do you think?
It's tough to bet. See, that's the thing. It just, in terms of pure best player on the field, it's obviously Josh, and I it's hard for me to pick against it. But man, that Denver pass rush is so good. It would not shock me if they were able to just stymie and be all over him for the entire night.
I'm going to give you something that will be huge in this game. That corner for Denver, Riley Moss?
Yes.
The guy that's been flagged for the most DPI penalties of anybody all year. By the way, he's not a bad corner.
I believe he's
and a lot of those calls have not been great calls. But the Broncos were flagged this year an NFL high for defensive pass interference penalties, 20 in total. It cost them 350 yards. Ooh. In the regular season. What did we see last week? We saw Josh Allen saying, "Here it comes, I'm letting it go." And it was the only way they could win that game, is for him to go deep in those big spots. That one, obviously, to Cooks on that final drive against zero coverage blitz. That was an insane throw. I mean, Cooks wasn't anywhere near from that area of zone coverage in that little opening when he let that ball go. But, he took shots to guys, if you were watching them for the first time, you'd never heard of Shavers. You couldn't believe Gabe Davis was back on that team. And they got some breaks on some of those deep shots. That could be an interesting way in which Buffalo hangs in there. It's 3rd and 9 because they couldn't run the football. And here comes that pass rush, and he lets it go because he's fearless. Mm-hmm. He's going to hang in there. He's going to take every big shot, and he's going to give these receivers a shot because if he doesn't, they're punting after a sack. Defensive penalties against Denver will be a huge factor in that game because they've been flagged for them all year long. If they get flagged for them again on Sunday, Buffalo's going to have a chance. Saturday, tomorrow, first game.
Yeah, it's going to be a tight whistle always in the playoffs, man.
This is a tough one to pick, but it's going to be a highly enjoyable kickoff to the weekend.
Very much.
Right, what's next?
Next up, we got the Niners heading up to Seattle, take on the Seahawks. Niners are one of the most injured teams remaining, with probably the exception of Buffalo, but the Seahawks might have the most important injury question of the day. Sam Darnold has popped up on the injury report with an oblique injury and is now listed as questionable. Kubiak said that Drew Lock got some reps in practice yesterday, so we'll find out what happens as we get closer to kickoff. The line right now, Seahawks -7, over-unders 45, 8 p.m. kickoff. That'll be on Fox. What do you got for this one, Kev? I think Sam Darnold will play, but questionable.
If he doesn't play, it obviously changes everything, even though I think if you've watched Seattle this year and you remember Minnesota last year, the number one concern you have is, will Sam Darnold soil himself in this spot? He did it last year in the playoffs against Minnesota. He did it in the season finale against Minnesota last year. Playoffs against the Rams, season finale against Minnesota. But they had a season finale for the 1 seed again this year. And it's hard to get that game out of my mind. That was a beatdown. Remember, the 49ers had just beaten the Bears where they put up like 500 yards of offense and 42 points. The week before that on Monday Night Football, they scored nearly 50 against the Colts. They were unstoppable offensively coming into that game, and Seattle's defense held them to 173 total yards, 3 points, 9 first downs, 2 of 9 on third down, 0 of 2 on fourth down. The 49ers had no shot offensively. The game was a 13-3 final, but it felt like it should have been 30-3. Seattle missed 2 field goals. They had an inexplicable 1st and goal at the 1 after running the ball down the field, and Darnold took a sack. 1st and goal at the 1. He took a 12-yard sack. Can't do that, on 1st and goal at the 1. You got to get flushed and throw the ball out of bounds or throw it through the back of the end zone. It should have been literally 30-3. It was 13-3. And if the 49ers are going to win this game, they've got to win it with offense, because their defense, regardless of what you saw last week against Philadelphia, it's not good. It's a bad their defense. Their defense is bad, regardless of what Philly's offense was able to do or not do. I mean, the 49ers gave up, nearly 500 yards and 38 points to the Bears. I mean, Phillip Rivers riddled that defense in that Monday night game before they turned it over on a kickoff return, and they couldn't get the 49ers off the field. I mean, Rivers in that game threw for nearly 300 yards, against that 49er defense. So it's hard for me to shake week 18. Week 1 doesn't matter when the 49ers beat the Seahawks in week 1. It's just never something you would go back to. And now Seattle's got him at home. Darnold's got to play because I don't trust Drew Lock. But if he does play and he's healthy, I like Seattle, and I like Seattle big in this game.
Yeah, I'm kind of feeling the same way. I think they're going to try and run it down San Francisco's throat, and I have a feeling that it's going to work, given how good their 2 backs have been this year. So,
they ran it. I mean, that was the game where Kenneth Walker III, who I think is a really good back, I'm surprised that he and Charbonnet don't get more carries during the regular season because they weren't a great rush offense during the regular season necessarily, but they were in week 18. They rushed for a combined 171 yards in the game for the 1 seed. So I would expect to see them line it up and run it again. Look, the 49ers are so well coached, and Robert Saleh defensively will try to do stuff that he didn't do in the game in week 18. Hard to get that image out of my mind. That was a total one-sided ass kicking in week 18. Don't look at the final score 13-3. It was not reflective of how badly the 49ers were beat down. So I like Seattle as long as Darnold plays.
Yeah, I'm kind of in the same vein on that one. All right. This one, my game of the week. Texans head up to Foxborough. CJ Stroud's coming off a rough performance, but golly, that defense is special. Murmurs of the Legion of Boom are being whispered in Houston, but Drake May has been playing at an MVP level. This is the best defense he's faced all year, but they don't exactly do anything to fool you pre-snap. Texans just kind of line it up and go. So the line is going to be Pats -3, over-under is 40.5, kind of like the under. Kickoff 3:30. That'll be on ESPN and ABC. What do you got for this one, Kev?
Yeah, everybody's playing the under in this one. And, snow is in the forecast for Sunday game time in Foxborough. We'll see how it shakes out, these forecasts a couple of days in advance. It might be sunny and 50 by the time we get there. But there is right now temperatures low to mid-30s and snow in the forecast during the game. Look, we've been talking about Houston for more than 2 months now. This is the best defense in the NFL. I think Seattle might be a close second. Cleveland's in that conversation, but it's just dominant. I mean, and like you said, they're not trying to trick anybody. They line up and they rush for and they beat everybody up front. Now, New England's offensive line, Will Campbell and company, big test. I mean, on Monday night, the Steelers just were not a big enough test offensively with the lack of just overall playmakers, O-line, et cetera. Rodgers' inability to be mobile. That's where I think that this game is different for Houston because they're facing a mobile quarterback, a quarterback that can really hurt you with his legs. The Patriots played the best defense they've played all year in the wild card round game against the Chargers. And the Chargers were incredibly effective defensively. It kept them in the game. The game was 9-3 going into the fourth quarter. 3 turnovers, I think, in the game for May, or 2 fumbles. One he didn't lose. One was almost a scoop and score. And the guard made a great play to recover it for Houston. But I still thought he played well. Like, even though he had some mistakes and it was much tougher going for them than it's been because of the Charger defense, I still thought he made some really good plays in the game. And I have to say that C.J. Stroud tried to hand it to Pittsburgh to keep him in the game, but he also made some big throws on third down. They were excellent on third down in that game, and a lot of that was Stroud on third down. I think the winner of this game has a really good chance to go to the Super Bowl. Obviously, would be 1 game away. I'm rooting for Houston to get to the Super Bowl because of the wager I put on them 2 months ago at 30-1 to win the AFC Championship. But this is a tough matchup for them as much as it's a tough matchup for New England. This one, I can tell you I'm not going to have a pick on this game with my smell test picks. I could see it going either way. I will say this. Everybody's so convinced, and it'll be even more so with the weather if it snows, that the game will go under. It'll probably end up being like a 23-20 game that goes over. Something like that one way or the other. If you're forcing me to pick it, I think I'll go New England at home and expect that Stroud will make a mistake or 2 that'll be a killer, and a couple of good plays too, and that May will make a big off-schedule throw or run that'll be a difference maker.
I think you've got this game read to a T, Kevin. I'm not even going to hold you.
Well, it'll probably be a blowout one way or the other.
No. We'll see how the playoff smell test goes, but my big dumb gut keeps telling me this is going to end in like a 7-6 game off of some crazy, like you said, Drake May throw that's going to give the Pats the lead late, and yeah, that'll be all she wrote for our Texans bet. But man, it's going to be a good one. I'm very excited for it.
I hedged big time with Pittsburgh on Monday night. Obviously, lost that hedge, so I still am holding the Houston ticket. So I'm going to hedge a little bit with New England on the money line, not the -3. But I'm still going to root for Houston, but at least I'll be able to cover my losses with a New England win.
Makes it all easier.
Or they cover my losses on Pittsburgh and the Houston wager. All right, let's get to the last game.
All right, going to be a cold one at Soldier Field Sunday night. Temps expected to be around 20 degrees, but the real feel expected to be hovering around 0. Jay Gruden said he loves the Rams, and McVay apparently owns Dennis Allen. Let me read a stat for you. Sean McVay has faced Dennis Allen-led defenses 8 times. He is 6-2, and his offense averaged 29 points. One of those wins was the 2018 NFC Championship game. Rams won 26 over 23 over New Orleans.
Yeah, rather controversial call, though, at the end of regulation.
Right.
Yeah.
You take away 2022.
New Orleans wanted an investigation. They wanted the FBI involved. I mean, I've never seen more whining. It was a terrible miss, an egregious miss. And New Orleans would have won that football game if not for that missed call. But, man, yeah, you would have thought we were, investigating the Kennedy assassination.
They wanted to replay the game. They wanted to put a minute back on the clock.
Yeah, the whole thing.
Yeah. Rams favored by 3.5.
Yes, he's done really well against Dennis Allen defenses.
Yes. So Rams 3.5-point favorites.
That was not a Dennis Allen Saints team, though.
No, I believe he led that defense, though.
Oh, he did. He was the defensive coordinator. Sean Payton was the head coach.
Yeah, that makes sense in my head.
Okay.
But yeah, 6:30 p.m. kick on NBC. What do you got here?
I mean, all 4 of these games are so interesting, and I just think there's been something wrong with the Rams. I mean, some of that can be the matchup. This is always about matchups, and maybe the Carolina thing wasn't a great matchup for them, but they also lost to the Falcons in Kirk Cousins. They blew the big lead at Seattle. The season finale where they played all their starters and they played to win that game to be the 5 seed, to clinch the 5 seed. I mean, Jacoby Brissett had a great game against them. I mean, the game was I think it was tied going into the fourth quarter of that game or close to it. They just haven't been right recently. I kind of like the Rams. I think the Rams are the better team, but Chicago's at home. It's cold.
The great equalizer.
Look, part of, that down the stretch, they didn't have Devontae Adams in some of those games. So that did matter, and they have him back. And the Puka Nacua, Devontae Adams combo is the best. And Matt Stafford, I trust right now more than I do Caleb Williams, but Caleb's been incredible. Here's the thing, though. Like, does Chicago, are they able to get some of those big chunk plays through the air against the Rams defense? Do they all of a sudden, have some success running the ball against the Rams? Does Stafford throw a critical pick like he did against, the Panthers and the Falcons? Threw one to Jesse Bates. Like Chicago's second in takeaways in the league. Rams.
Oh, you're starting to talk me into Chicago too, and I really don't want to take it. Yeah. I'm gonna stick with the Rams here, but now the more we talk about it, the less surprised I would be if Chicago escaped with a win.
I mean, if Chicago, oh man, do we want to see Chicago at Seattle in the NFC Championship game?
Not particularly, but
I'd much rather see Rams at Seattle.
Yeah, I would like to see
a rematch of that game that was the game of the year.
I think Goodell wants to see it too, so who knows? He might put a call in.
No, the Bears, trust me, are a magical story that would be huge for the NFL.
This is true.
I mean, Chicago this is one of those where,
the rebirth.
Even last year to a certain degree, longtime NFL fans, longtime NFL people were glad to see Washington finally back in a game that mattered. And I think that, the league would feel that way about Chicago as well. So, Rams.
All right.
Rams, Seattle's. I think we both, in addition to picking Houston, I think mid-season we both said Rams, Seattle. Those are the 2 best teams in the NFC.
I mean, yeah, especially after that. That Thursday night game really cemented it. That was like, all right, these are the 2 teams that I want to see duke it out to go to the Super Bowl in the NFC title game.
I do want to tell you about my friends at Foley Mechanical. A few months back, we were having issues with our HVAC system. It was giving us problems. We called Foley Mechanical. Dan Foley is great. He owns Foley Mechanical. He came out by himself, dealt with us directly. He's impressive. His staff is impressive. He owns 100% of the company. They're not a franchise. They're not some big private equity firm. He controls the quality from the equipment to the people he hires, his team, professional, skilled, and sharp. Foley Mechanical is a full-service heating, AC, hot water, and boiler company, and they're the go-to for older homes with radiator heat, a real specialty. They work across D.C., Maryland, and Virginia, and they proudly install Amana HVAC equipment. If your system needs help or you just want it done right, call Foley Mechanical or go to FoleyMechanical.com. Tell Dan that I sent you. All right. First, I do want to mention that our Waldorf Honda poll of the day is up on the Team 980's Twitter page at Team 980. Our poll of the day, driven by the Waldorf Honda, it all starts with a click at waldorfhonda.com, is what's the game this weekend you're anticipating and excited about the most? For me, I think it's Texans-Patriots.
Same here,
I
man.
just want to see this Houston defense. And I've got, a little bit invested in that game on
Makes it
Houston
easy.
winning the AFC title. So that would be my choice. What would be your choice?
I got to go Texas Patriots too, man. But if I had to pick a different game, I'm kind of split between Bills and Broncos and Rams Bears. Like Niners Seahawks is going to be fun, but I do want to see Matt Stafford go up into Chicago and face against that really, really strong Bears defense. As you mentioned, number one in takeaways this year, but Josh Allen versus the Broncos defense is going to be a fun one. It's going to be a great weekend. I'm going to be locked in.
Yeah, me too. All right, let me just mention with the smell test that my Monday national championship pick or picks, plural, I will tweet out on Monday. We don't have a show on Monday. I don't want to give them out right now. I want to wait to see where these numbers move and more information comes in. But I will tweet it out at Kevin Sheehan. DC. The smell test today brought to you by our good friends at Window Nation. Buy 4, get 4 free, and don't pay anything for 2 years. That's the January deal. Hurry. It ends at the end of this month. But if you need new windows, you're going to get 4 free windows with every 4 purchased, with no money down, no monthly payments, and no interest charged for 2 full years. So you won't pay anything for your new windows for 2 full years, but you'll realize the benefit of those new windows with lower heating bills, keeping that, warm, cozy, comfortable, heat in your home. Call them at 866-90-NATION or head to windownation.com. All right. The smell test last week finally cratered 0-5. And like I said on Monday, you're lucky I didn't give you all the games that I was considering, because those all lost too. Like, I liked Philadelphia. I liked the under in the Carolina Rams game. So they all, would have lost. You would have gone 0-8 if I'd given you all of the games I was considering a week ago today. We're actually going back to Thursday, because I started that weekend with Oregon plus 3.5 and the under. I mean, neither one of those two were even close. And then I had Green Bay, and that certainly looked like a winner for most of it. But then I finished off with, 2 games that weren't even close, the Chargers and the Steelers. 0-5. Still, though, for the season, 117, 70, and 13. So I'm still hitting at 62.5% for the weekend. Interesting, the reaction from some of you who have been winning all year with my picks, and then finally, for one weekend out of 20, lost. All right. On Saturday, Seattle minus the 7 is the play. The 49ers are the most heavily bet public team of the weekend. Recent impressions matter so much. They went into Philadelphia. They knocked off the defending champs. They look so well coached. And people were startled to see the number that they saw. I'm going to assume Sam Darnold is going to play. This thing, as Ben Fox told us, and I knew this, got bet up from 6.5 to 7.5 by the Sharps to start the week. The half point coming back to 7 right now is a good thing for me, because I'm playing the favorite. But it came back just because of the uncertainty around Sam Darnold. I will tell you that if he doesn't play, I'm going to pull this on Twitter before the kickoff. The line will change if he doesn't play. But the Seahawks minus the 7, if he doesn't play and it drops to 5 or something like that, I might still play him. So follow me on Twitter. Seattle minus the 7 is the first play. The second play, we go to Sunday, and the NFL matchup that I'm looking forward to the most, and that would be the New England-Houston game. And it's not a side in this game. It is the under in this game. Now, right now, the number is at 40. There's some 41s, some 40.5s. I'm going to go under. I'm going to go over 40.5. The world is on the under in this game. I mean, massive under action because of the Houston defensive performance last week, because of New England's defensive performance last week, and because the weather forecast does have snow in the forecast. So I am going over 40.5 in the Houston-New England game Sunday at 3:00. Those are the 2 plays, and then I'll have college picks, maybe plural, both the side and the total in that game on Monday via Twitter. Enjoy the football weekend, everybody. Back on Tuesday. Chris Russell's next.